we will not do anything complicated here. It's a very last session for today. You should be already like filled up with a ton of complicated details about migrating billiards of big ends to ints and what actually other way, ints to big ends and stuff like that. So this one will be really relaxing. We will just go a little bit retrospectively back in time and try to kind of maybe fill up a bit of the gaps in knowledge as I did during the preparation for this talk. Where do words which we use in our professional life come from? If you will read abstract for this talk, you will see that I was a bit ambitious when I've listed quite many of them. During the preparation, it turned out that it's a little bit too much. One cannot really make a good storyline out of those pretty independent words, so that means it gets boring pretty fast. So I've reduced it a bit, so hopefully it will work. A few words about myself. My name is Slava. I come originally from Ukraine, live for last half part of my life, about 20 years in Germany. And as majority of people here, I basically code for money. So I'm freelance developer, sometimes for food, sometimes for money, depending how good is the project actually. Nothing special here. I would like to keep the, let's say, technical details out of our way. All the background pictures which I've used here, if not mentioned, are coming from this website mentioned here. And in highly unlikely chance that you will visit Dortmund, and probably the only reason for visiting Dortmund is for Borussia Dortmund's game, so for football. If you will be around, please send me an email. I would be really happy to go with you for a beer or a coffee. So those kind of things we get out of the way. I've already wasted 2 of my minutes. So let's start with the words which we would like to talk today about. So first one is logs. Logs is something, there was an original idea for this presentation. I was start to think like, what does it mean? I'm not a native speaker, as I presume majority of the people in this hall. I have no idea, what does it mean log? I had to open the dictionary and check. And if like doing logging is pretty easy in our case. In Python, you just import a module, do some things, and out of that you get such statements. In this case, it's just some output of Django requests or server logs. Nothing fancy here. You see that the logs have certain structure. They have timestamp, certain information about the level, and the details of the log statement itself. If you have a fancy tool like Datadog or Elasticsearch or ElkStack, you can use this kind of the information to filter the logs. So I think you're all set with the logs, right? It's one of the pillars of modern observability. But where does the word come from? If you will check the dictionary, what log means actually the piece of wood. And a friend of mine thought that, you know, those kind of things, they look like pieces of wood, so that's why they are called logs. No, it's a bullshit. They are not. But they are really much related because the origin of this word comes from the nautics, from the sea navigation. At some point, especially at the age of discoveries, the captains started to kind of keep track on what is happening, where they are, and try to kind of have some kind of the journal of their journey through the seas. And they started with the very first essential thing is their speed. So how do you measure the speed? At that time, there was no GPS, no smartphones. It was a terrible word, probably. So you had this wonderful device. So it's basically the log, the piece of wood, the rope, and the rope had some marks on it. Someone just, when you are on the ship, throws this log. It rotates because the ship moves, and someone nearby has some device like a watch which measures the time, and he counts how many marks have passed by, gives this information to the captain. Captain, with a lot of high-level mathematics, computes it into the speed, writes it down into the journal, and here we are. That's the first logbook. So something where the speed of the ship was actually written down. Everyone liked this idea, and those logbooks started to evolve. if in the beginning there was just the speed of the ship, they started to give much more information about like the weather conditions, different events, what happened. So something like a diary of the ship. You see some of them were extremely nicely illustrated with the pictures and with some fishes they found. So it was even I would say the piece of art or the scrapbook as they call it these days, but practical one. And that was, let's say, 16th, 17th century. This idea of having the detailed timeline of certain events was pretty much helpful inside of the navigation and nautics. And as technology progressed, this kind of the ideas were transferred into the other forms of engineering and transport, aviation. And here, for example, you see that that's kind of the log entries for the steam locomotive. So looks pretty much somewhere in the same direction, but the key idea is that from sea and navigation, it's somehow transferred into other branches of engineering, and finally, somewhere in the middle of 20th century, programmers started to use logs. Very important, at that time there were no programmers, right? It's the middle of the 20th century. People who became programmers, they were not programmers, they were just like mechanical engineers, mathematicians, chemical engineers, people coming from military, a lot, by the way. Those people have those different backgrounds, and because in their backgrounds the whole idea of the log was already pretty much established, they took it over into the world of computers and used the same process in order to describe what is happening with this huge machine, which was called a computer back in the day. Interesting, you see, logs were handwritten back in the day. So still, middle of 20th century, computers, everything, digitalization, blah, blah, blah. Like in Germany these days, but a little bit better. Yeah, handwritten logs is something I would say looks unusual to me, at least. And only from there on, we landed to what we kind of get used to have in the modern world. You see, they haven't changed that much since the time of the first Unix distributions. So something what has chronological record keeping, like back in the times of maritime logbooks, it has the incremental data structure, so everything is just appended, and that is something which you can use for trying to understand what's happening with your system. Well, if you will probably look into all that from the modern point of view, you would call it maybe more of the event stream or like eventing systems, but in the end of the day, that was logs. So what is most important with that? When next time you will writing some kind of the log statement, don't forget that you are throwing a log. Very important, because that's how it goes. That's all for the word log. Let's move into the next one, cache. I don't know how you are, but when you just read on the name of this word or how it's written, you immediately think it's probably French, because E in the end, SH, probably French. Looks like French, it is French. I don't know, I'm not French, I don't know how to read it. If someone knows how one should read this, the origin of this word cache, is this cache or cache? I'm not sure. Cache. Yeah, so it was somehow just pulled off and being used as the word cache, and in French it means to hide. So this word was basically imported from French into English in the 18th century basically for the military and for the exploration, and meant something, you put kind of some food or some ammunition somewhere well hidden so that the next or future yourself or someone who will follow your steps for the same expedition will just use this thing in order to kind of survive or make their mission more acceptable, more successful. We're all far away from military, I guess, or majority of us. So actually, the best example of what is caching is what squirrels doing. Because you see, a single squirrel can bury up to 3,000 nuts in a season in the process known as caching. So they do it pretty regularly and independently, by the way, out of computer science. And because squirrels are such a, let's say, live and vivid example of caching, it turned out that they were used a lot in the times when, or a lot during the teaching of different methods of caching, especially in 80s and 90s. So they became a symbol of a cache. I haven't found any photos, unfortunately, of any textbooks or lecture notes, but if someone will find it, would be very nice to see. Yeah, by the way, one of the most interesting questions, which scientists are still not sure about, that if this nice little squirrel hides 3,000 nuts in a season, does it remember where did it put it or not? Very good question. No one knows. But now scientists tend to actually answer with higher probability than in fact, yes, it remembers and knows all the nuts it puts into the cache. So cache appeared in 60s or 70s, mostly as majority of the things mentioned here in IBM research papers. Nothing really interesting about it. It was something where you can, access access data fast and without much of the fuss. Important was that engineers also borrowed this term because the cache, at least in the initial systems, was the hardware cache. It was hidden from the user or from programmer back in the day. So that's why it was something which was happening, let's say, outside of your control. Of course, as the time evolved, we've got a ton of different caches. Django itself has a number of different levels of caching, but of course we have CDNs, we have Redis, we have everything, we have different levels of caching in computers. So it's one of the most important things which makes our systems faster. And finally, maybe the most ironic and funny fact that in modern French tech world, it borrows word cache in its current English form from English and actually uses the English form for naming this concept of cache. Quite interesting linguistic twist, I would say. So let's try another one. We'll see how many can we manage in the next 10 minutes. The very, very evil word, daemon. We have experts here who know what how one should read the old Greek. So daemon, what was it? Daemon. That's the origin of this word. It's actually nothing really bad. It was somehow this demonization or, let's say, a bit of bad reputation the demons got during the Christianity. But technically, they were not evil. They were just like, some kind of the supernatural beings. Nothing really bad about them. And how it relates to our demons, actually, strangely enough, James Clerk Maxwell, one of the most prominent scientists of 19th century, he did a lot of different things, and one of them was a thing called Maxwell's demon. It's some kind of the thought experiment I will show on the next slide, which just like something hypothetical construction which he wanted to present in order to do some kind of the thinking about the laws of thermodynamics. Most importantly, it was some kind of the entity or creature which does something without expending any kind of the work. So free worker, you see, already starts something looking what we're used to. Maxwell was a very religious person, so of course he would never ever call this entity a demon. But Lord Kelvin, who was apparently not that religious person, called this, given the name of this concept as a Maxwell's demon. So that's a small illustration of this nice demon who just, opens the gate for different molecules and just lets some of them in or out. The most importantly, it does it in the background without any control and without expanding any kind of the work. And that's kind of the demon was exactly the inspiration for introducing the word of the demon in 1963 in computer science. So that was a group of MIT Project Mac, including Fernando Corbi-Corbato, one of the Turing finalists, or the persons who got the Turing Award in 1990. And he was, including his group, working on building one of the MIT computer projects. And here is the quote: "We fancifully begin to use the word demon to describe background processes that work tirelessly to perform system chores." Yeah. So what a twist, right? So something which is coming from the thermodynamics and Maxwell somehow landed in the project related to the computer science, and finally landed to what we use each day on our systems as a background processes. And yeah, not everyone just maybe liked the idea of being referenced to something from Maxwell, or maybe it was too much. So as many times we and software engineers and system administrators are doing, it was rationalized via so-called backronym as a disk and execution monitor. Has nothing to do with the original concept, but nevertheless, you can find this kind of the explanation of the word demon in the wild. There will be another example where a similar thing happened with another word. So how much time do I have left? I just need to pick up which ones the most spicy ones. Okay, let's do maybe two short ones. The bit, the smallest piece of information, the bit. It's pretty simple. It's just a contraction of two words, binary digit or binary information digit. So the father of modern information theory, Claude Shannon, introduced or used the word bit in his paper, which is highly cited, I would say, Mathematical Theory of Communication. You see, it was also published in the middle of 20th century. And basically, they needed something what could take just two values, 0 and 1. So this kind of thing didn't exist, so they invented this a binary information digit, or simply bit. But Shannon didn't invent this word by himself. He attributed the origin of this term to John Tukey, probably, hopefully I've read it correctly, who actually also at 1947, somewhere in the communication in the Bell Labs, used this word bit as a binary information digit. What is interesting, I'm not sure if you ever heard about this person. I never. He did a lot of work in mathematics, which I'm pretty far away, so I don't know, except maybe one. He's also like one of the fathers of fast Fourier transformation, which is a cornerstone of modern image processing. But for us, the most important that besides many things, Professor Tukey coined another term which was foundational for our industry. In fact, this word is software. So he was the guy who introduced the concept or coined the word software in our lives. So all industry, thank you. That's pretty good. Byte, bigger or smaller brother of the bit. Just the collection of some bits. Here, story is not really somehow spectacular. They just needed to have an ability to represent a character via some bits, and this number of bits they called the byte. The term byte was introduced by Werner Buchholz in I forgot, it's somewhere in 1961. Yes, yeah, it's not on the slide. In 1961, just to kind of like sound very similar to bit, but different and easy to pronounceable. So you know the bit was already there on the market, and like for more than 10 years, and they just introduced the word byte to symbolize the number of the bits. What is interesting that it was not really 8 bits at that time. It can be 6 bits, 7 bits, even variable number of bits. And only like 10 or 20 years later, it was standardized into 8 bits. Yeah, so that's the story. Yeah, that's a very good one. The word ping. Ping. You know, ping. Also comes from the naval systems or from the sonars. So sonar is, I've written that it's a short for sound navigation and ranging. So system of the navigation. So what is ping? Ping was the short burst of sound which was used for like throwing the sound inside of the water and waiting until the sound will be reflected from some kind of the obstacles on its way, measuring how long did it took to come back, and based on that you can try to build a mathematical model and tell how the things look around you based on the distance. I think majority of you seen those nice American movies where you know the crew of the submarine like this bing, bing, and everyone is sweating and there should be no sound, and then at some point someone sneezes and yeah, that's the end of the world, they are discovered and everyone is dead. So terrible actually. So that was the ping. And the word ping sounds, or was exactly selected that it sounds like this burst of sound which was thrown by those audio generation devices, because it was pretty high frequency, a sharp sound, and it sounded like this way, and it was called ping. And this guy, who I also quote here from his original website, unfortunately, that's one of the examples why I decided to keep the reference to the website, because Mike was passed away a long time ago, but his original writing about the ping as utility still lives on under this website, under this web address, and one can actually read his own words about this thing. That was just a hack which he written in 1983 in order to check some connectivity. And I name it after the sound that the sonar makes, inspired by the whole principle of echolocation. So yeah, that's how the echolocation and once more the navigation and the terminology from the nautics and maritime sciences came into software engineering. Pretty unexpected, I would say. But yeah, that's how it is. Thank you, Mr. Moose. We have a few more minutes. Yeah, maybe just a short one. And as usually, as you've seen before with the daemon, same happened actually with ping. People didn't like the sonars apparently. I don't know why, they're nice. Or maybe they were scared of those American movies. But packet internet groper, if it helps, I don't know. But yeah, that was also rationalized in this way by some people. It was already done at the times when the author of Ping was alive. He was just laughing on that, but yes, that's where we are. What is maybe the most interesting about Ping is that it not only became the verb in itself, as official word, so the consequences of actually introducing this utility and the whole thing, they are pretty big. Like these days, people use word like ping me, who are far away from computer science. You know, the people who play computer games, for them, ping has their own meaning. So you know how fast or how big or how well is the latency for your connection. So it was pretty big cultural reference which this word had on the modern life. And of course, from back in the day, here I have a little joke that system administrators has always tried to, like, to make a fun of, that I ping my fridge to make sure it's still online. These days, in post-Internet of Things era, that sounds already a little bit regular, right? Because, okay, pinging the fridge, okay, why not? I usually have Wi-Fi connection to my wash machine, and pinging the fridge is nothing really. But back in the day, it was still, pretty much advanced. My time is go. Okay, let me see what I have. Maybe just the last one. Yeah, let's make the last one. We will skip the kernel and shell because, yeah, well, let's do it a little bit. So I will skip kernel, but let's go with the shell. So shell was introduced by a French computer scientist, Louis Pouzet, probably, because he wanted to have some kind of the interface between the person and the computer. So you should think that at that time, when we are speaking of those first Linuxes, Unix machines, or even before the Unix mainframes, people were interacting with the machines, that's brutally writing into the memory. So something we kind of dislike these days, especially with Python. Everything is controlled, everything like that. Not at this time. At that time, you brutally write something into the memory and it can just, die out because someone made a mistake. So this guy said, no, it's not good, and introduced the command language called runcom, abbreviation of run commands. And it was meant to be the interface, as we would call it, because it was the terminal interface, TUI, as we call these days, something which should protect the kernel, so the main of the system, and from us, users. And that's why it was called shell, so something what protects in, even though, yes, it's interface. What is interesting, though, the concept was popularized mainly and heavily by Dennis Ritchie and Ken Thompson, so when they introduced Unix. Very interesting paper, by the way, original one. I've skipped it, but if you like, I can point. I can send you the link. It's publicly available. Very interesting paper where they introduced the Unix as itself. Just interesting to read how the things didn't really much evolve in the last, let's say, 30 or 40 years after the introduction. But what is interesting, you've seen those endings, RC, right, in your configurations on your Mac or Linux. Where do they come from? What do they mean? No idea. Actually, those are exactly the remnants of runcom, of this initial first shell created by Dr. Pouzet. So those are abbreviation for run command, or they were stemming from this very nice 1965 version of original shell. Finally, still alive, bugs. Bugs are everywhere. No bugs, no job. It's pretty simple. Our job, is just to write bugs. Someone just write more, someone less. No bugs means no work done, right? So that means just, depending on the qualification of the software developer, is the amount of the bugs you kind of produce. But nevertheless, our job is, in the end, to write bugs. So they are called also errors, faults, defects, whatever. And yeah, it's a pretty rhetoric question. What has this thing on the right, the moth, to do with the cabinet, which in fact is not a cabinet, it's a computer. I'm pretty sure that you've heard this very nice and interesting story. It's called it was logged by Grace Hopper. You see, it's a page from Harvard Mark II electromechanical computers log featuring a dead mod that was removed from the device. So they found this mod which caused the circuit breakage. It's a first actual case of a bug being found. Very nice anecdote. But it's not origins of the word bug, in fact, at all. At that time when she wrote that, the word bug was heavily used, and the only what made it a little bit different is that she already kind of make a fun that she connected the biological bug with the bug in the system. That's why it was kind of funny. But in fact, the traces of the bug can be can go pretty far back into the 19th century, because already in engineering, the term bug meant something something not working or something what is unexpectedly produces the problems. Here is the quote from Thomas Edison. It has been just so in all of my inventions. The first step is intuition, then comes with the burst, then difficulties arise. By the way, sounds like a typical software engineering. Then difficulties arise. This gives out, and it is then that bugs, as such little faults and difficulties are called, show themselves, and months of intense watching, study, and labor are requisite before the commercial success or failure is certainly reached. Certainly is a very nice thing. In our case, it's not always certainly. Most of the times it's uncertainly or never reached, but yeah. So this was a very nice story. I think many of you have heard it, especially when you started with the computer engineering. You know the bug which was found in the big mainframe, but it's still like merely a joke. By the way, the same story about the bug was presented to me when I started learning all that a bit differently. It was already a more modern approach than the bugs were residing in laser printers, because it's really warm inside, and that's why they are called bugs, you know, because someone found the bugs in the laser printers. So the folklore of software engineering evolves with time, and yes, and that's it. So I would like to thank you for holding such a long time, 32 minutes. But what is important message of all that? We kind of tend to think about the software engineering as very like separate field from everything else. But in fact, it's not. It has the roots and connections to all other disciplines like mathematics, philosophy, engineering, design, everything. And the foundations and the field itself, which we kind of hopefully called our industry as a software development industry, was built mostly by people actually from other fields and other disciplines. So we should be definitely grateful to all of them. Not only giants, by the way, because of course there were giants. There were people who were mentioned on those slides and have some articles on Wikipedia, but there were hundreds and thousands of other people who were, you know, just a regular worker inside of the groups like all of us are, but they were slowly, continuously driving the field forwards. And let's thank to all of them.